The strongest friendships, they say, are built on history. Leela and I had 23 years of it, a sedimentary rock of shared experience. First grade glue-eating confessions, middle school sleepover seances, high school heartbreaks administered like emotional first aid in her powder blue bedroom. We were fossils in each other's lives, permanent and defined. As adults, the rhythm held. My life was orderly, a stable but unglamorous accounting job, a sensible 401k, a rental apartment with good light. Leela's was a vibrant, chaotic watercolor. She floated between gallery jobs and artistic ventures, her finances a precarious cliffside garden she somehow kept blooming. I was her anchor, she was my splash of color. The dynamic was our equilibrium. Her crisis that Tuesday was not uncommon. "Eve, I'm in a bind." Her voice was a tense whisper over the phone. "The gallery is letting me go. My rent's due Friday, and I've got this opportunity, a collective studio space. It's perfect, but the deposit..." I knew the script. I'd advanced her money before, sums I mentally categorized as loans, but emotionally wrote off as friendship taxes. This time was different. "It's $5,000, Eve. I know it's huge. I have a line on a private loan, but they need a cosigner with better credit than mine, which is, a bar set in hell." I felt the familiar squeeze in my chest, the tension between my instinct to protect her and my instinct to protect myself. "Leela, co-signing, that's my name on the debt. If anything goes wrong..." "Nothing will go wrong." The tears were audible now, a skill she'd honed to devastating effect over 2 decades. "It's a 6-month loan. I've already sold 3 pieces on commission. The money's coming. It's just timing. You'd be saving my life, Eve. You've always saved me." That was her trump card, the history, the ghost of every borrowed sweater, every defended honor, every late-night rescue. Saying no felt not like prudent boundary setting, but like a betrayal of our very geology. "What do you need from me?" I asked, my voice already heavy with resignation. "Just some information for the application. They need it fast. Can I just come over with my laptop? We can do it together?" She arrived smelling of jasmine and anxiety, her laptop tucked under her arm. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where we'd done homework a lifetime ago. The online form looked legitimate enough, a somewhat generic lending portal. She filled in her details, her fingers flying. Then she turned the screen to me. "See, here's the cosigner section. Just your name, social security number, driver's license, and annual income. It's just verification. The loan is totally in my name. You're just vouching for me." I hesitated, my accountant's brain flashing warning lights. But her eyes, wide and shimmering, were a mirror of the girl who'd held my hand before my first driving test. I input the data, each keystroke feeling like a tiny surrender. She leaned over and hugged me, her cheek wet against mine. "Thank you. You're my person. Always." For a month, everything was normal. Leela texted me pictures of the new studio, her easel set up by a sun-drenched window. She talked of inspiration, of fresh starts. I pushed the loan to the back of my mind, a small contained worry in the vault of our friendship. The first sign was a letter, official-looking, from Granite Peak Lending. It was addressed to me, but it referenced an application for credit. My stomach dropped. I hadn't applied for anything. I called the number, was put on hold, and finally reached a representative. "Yes, Miss Evans, we have your application for a $15,000 personal loan. It's currently under review." "$15,000? No, I co-signed for a $5,000 loan for my friend, Leela Shaw." A rustle of papers. "I have no record of a co-signer arrangement. This is a sole applicant loan in your name. The funds were dispersed via wire transfer 3 weeks ago to an account we have on file." The room tilted. I gave the woman Leela's name, her details. "I'm sorry," the voice said, polite and final. "The only name associated with this application is yours. All verified details are yours." I hung up, my hands trembling. A cold, metallic taste flooded my mouth. This wasn't a mistake. The form, the urgency, the tears, it had been a production, a one-woman show designed to lure me into handing over the keys to my own credit. She hadn't wanted a cosigner. She wanted a ghost, a willing ghost, to haunt alone in my name. Fury, white and hot, eclipsed the hurt. I called her, no answer. I texted, "We need to talk, now." An hour later, my doorbell rang. It was her. She wasn't smiling. She looked pale, defensive. I didn't let her in. I stood in the doorway, the letter clutched in my hand. "A $15,000 loan in my name, Leela? What did you do?" Her face crumpled, not into guilt, but into a performance of wounded shock. "What? Eve, no! What are you talking about? Granite Peak Lending, the loan you had me apply for. They say it's mine. $15,000. Tears welled in her eyes instantly, convincingly. "Oh my God! Oh, Eve, no!" She brought her hands to her mouth. That's a mistake. It must be a system error. Those online lenders are so shady. I only applied for 5. I would never..." "You said there's no cosigner. You said the money was wired out. Where did it go, Leela?" She shook her head, backing up a step, the victim of a confusing, cruel world. I don't know. To my account, I guess, but I only got 5, I swear. Maybe they took my identity too. Maybe they took your info and my info and did something. She was building a narrative right there on my porch, her eyes wide of fabricated horror. We're both victims here, Eve. We need to go to the police. It was the brazenness of it that stole my breath, the seamless pivot from perpetrator to fellow casualty. She was looking at me, my oldest friend, and telling me a story where she was just as scared, just as wronged. She was counting on the history, on the default setting of my trust, to cloud the glaring, terrible math. I stared at her, the stranger I'd known my whole life. The tears, once a signal of shared feeling, were now just a tool. The history was not a foundation, it was a weapon she'd turned against me. Get out, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Eve, please, you have to believe me. Get out, now. She left, her shoulders shaking with sobs that for the first time in 23 years I knew to be as hollow as the loan she'd taken in my name. I closed the door and leaned against it. The ledger of our friendship, once a cherished volume, was just converted into a single devastating line item, a $15,000 debt, and the priceless cost of knowing the person you loved most was a brilliant, desperate fraud. The cold equations of betrayal had been written, and I was just beginning to learn how to read them. In the silent wake of Leela's departure, a strange clarity descended. The grief was there, a vast, sucking void, but it was temporarily walled off by a more urgent Binglan Xiao, survival. I was not just a betrayed friend, I was a victim of fraud. My sentimental heart was a luxury I could no longer afford. My accountant's brain, long subservient to emotion where Leela was concerned, was now the sole commanding officer. I started with a full lockdown, credit reports from all 3 agencies, every account, every inquiry laid bare. There it was, midway down the Experian report. Granite Peak Lending, $15,000, opened 0415. A malignant, factual growth on the clean lines of my financial history. I placed fraud alerts, my fingers steady on the keyboard. Each click was a brick in a wall between the old Eve and the new. Next, the police. The officer at the precinct station was weary, his desk a landscape of other people's crises. I laid out the facts, the friend, the ruse, the loan, the denial. I showed him the letter, my credit report. He listened, took notes, asked questions in a monotone. And you gave her your social security number and driver's license info voluntarily? Under false pretenses. She said it was for a cosigner application. But you entered the information yourself? Yes. He sighed, a soft professional sound of managed expectation. That makes it complicated. It becomes a she said about intent. You authorized the use of your details. Proving she intended to commit fraud from the get-go is tough without a recording or a written confession. She took out a loan for triple what she said. She lied. But you can't prove what she told you, and she's claiming it was a mistake or that the lender is at fault. I nodded. He leaned back. We can file a report. It creates a paper trail. But for immediate action, you need to treat this as identity theft and go through the financial channels. Dispute it with the lender directly. Get a lawyer. The word lawyer landed like a stone. This was the territory of lawsuits and depositions, not tearful reconciliation over coffee. This was the nuclear option. I filed the report, a slim carbon copy, my only physical token of the crime. Walking out of the precinct, the spring sun felt mocking. I hired Amanda Shaw, no relation, a fact she noted with dry amusement, a steely-eyed attorney who specialized in financial fraud. Her office was all clean lines and quiet efficiency, a sanctuary from my emotional chaos. I repeated the story. She listened without pity, which is what I desperately needed. The voluntary surrender of your PII, personally identifiable information, is a hurdle, she said, her pen tapping a legal pad. But the scale of the misrepresentation is in your favor. She requested $5,000 for a specific purpose. You provided data for what you believed was a cosigner role, and a $15,000 sole applicant loan resulted. We can argue fraudulent inducement. The first step is a demand letter, a formal, legal shot across the bow. What if she ignores it? Then we escalate, but the goal here isn't necessarily a courtroom drama, Eve. It's resolution, getting the loan removed from your name and repaid. The threat of legal action is often the catalyst. She studied me. You should be prepared. People who do this, especially to those close to them, are often deeply manipulative. Her victim narrative will intensify. She will recruit allies. This will get messy in ways that aren't just financial. She was right. The social fallout began before Amanda's letter even hit the mail. It started with a text from Maya, a mutual friend from college. Hey, just talked to Leela. She's a wreck. She says there's been a horrible misunderstanding with some loan. She's terrified you're going to press charges for something she didn't do. I stared at the screen. Leela was not lying low. She was building her defense case in the court of our shared friendships. I typed back, careful, factual. It's not a misunderstanding. She stole my identity to take out a $15K loan. I have the paperwork. I filed a police report. The 3 dancing dots appeared, then disappeared. They reappeared. That's really heavy, Eve. She's saying it was a shady lender that screwed you both over. It just doesn't sound like the Leela we know. The Leela we knew wouldn't do this, I replied, the ache sharp. But she did. Maya never responded. I was being preemptively tried and judged. Leela, the vibrant, struggling artist, was a more sympathetic defendant than I, the stable, sensible accountant. My orderliness was being recast as coldness, my pursuit of justice as vindictiveness. The demand letter arrived at Leela's studio via certified mail. Amanda CC'd me on the email she sent her. It was a masterpiece of legal threat, cold, precise, and utterly uncompromising. It gave her 10 days to provide proof of full repayment of the loan to the lender, plus all associated fees, or face a civil lawsuit for fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and damages. Her response was not to Amanda. It was to me, a torrent of messages, each a different shade of manipulation. Eve, I got this monstrous letter from a lawyer. How could you? After everything. I'm your sister. This is a mistake. Then, an hour later, I'm scared. I feel like you're trying to destroy me. Is this about jealousy? My studio? My art? Then, finally, the masterstroke, late at night. I'm sitting here looking at these legal words, and I feel like I'm dying. You've won. You've always thought you were better than me, with your stable job and your perfect credit. Fine, you win. I'll figure out how to pay this, even though it will ruin me. I hope my suffering makes you feel better. It was a performance designed to trigger every one of my old instincts, to comfort, to de-escalate, to rescue. She was dangling the dynamic that had defined us for 2 decades, hoping I'd snap back into my designated role. The part of me that was still the girl in the powder blue bedroom screamed to call her, to make it stop. But the newer, harder part, the part that had seen the cold numbers on the credit report, saw the calculation. This was her final weapon, emotional blackmail, disguised as surrender. She wasn't admitting guilt, she was reframing my defense as a premeditated attack born of secret jealousy. She was rewriting our history, casting herself as the martyred free spirit, and me as the petty bureaucrat who finally snapped. I didn't reply. I forwarded the messages to Amanda. The victim narrative, as predicted, do not engage, it's evidence. The silence from me enraged her. The social smear campaign intensified. I heard from another friend that Leela was telling people I'd snapped under pressure, that I was having a psychological break and was fabricating the whole thing out of some deep-seated resentment. Our shared history, once our bond, was now the palette from which she drew colors to paint me as unstable, cruel, and untrustworthy. I sat in my orderly apartment, surrounded by the quiet she had shattered. The financial audit was straightforward. The forensic audit of our friendship was infinitely more painful. Every cherished memory was now a crime scene I had to re-examine for clues I'd missed. Had she always been this, or had desperate need sculpted her into this master manipulator? It didn't matter. The consequence of my blind trust was a war on 2 fronts, one against a $15,000 debt, and another against the ghost of the person I loved most once, who was now tirelessly working to annihilate my reputation in the world we'd built together. I was no longer just fighting for my credit, I was fighting for my own reality. Amanda's 10-day deadline passed in a silence that was louder than any response. Leela did not repay the loan. She did not contact Amanda. Instead, she poured her creative energy into her parallel narrative, a shadow campaign waged in the soft spaces of mutual friends and social media implication. I became a ghost in my own social circle. Invitations dried up. Group chats I'd been in for years fell silent, or I'd catch a fleeting reference to supporting friends through mental health crises before being quietly removed. A birthday dinner for Maya happened. I saw the photos online, Leela at the center, smiling wanly, surrounded by a protective phalanx of people we'd both called friends. The caption read, "Surrounding ourselves with love and light. #StrongerTogether." The subtext was a neon billboard aimed at me. I was being erased, painted over as the villain in Leela's tragic masterpiece. My stability was now evidence of coldness. My pursuit of legal recourse was proof of a vendetta. My silence was construed as admission of guilt. It was a psychological siege, and I was losing ground by simply existing. Amanda was unmoved by the social theater. "It's a common tactic," she said, her voice crisp over the speakerphone. "Discredit the accuser. It puts pressure on you to drop the charges to salvage your relationships. We proceed. We filed the civil suit. Now we enter discovery." The word discovery sounded like an archaeological dig. It felt like one. With the lawsuit officially filed, we had the power to subpoena records. Amanda's requests were surgical and damning. We subpoenaed Leela's bank records for the period surrounding the loan disbursement. We subpoenaed the complete file from Granite Peak Lending, including the IP address used for the application and all communication logs. While we waited, the loan itself was a ticking stone in my gut. I made the minimum payment, under duress, as Amanda advised. "Paying it doesn't admit liability, but defaulting destroys your credit while we fight," she explained. Each auto payment was a physical ache, a monthly tribute to betrayal. I tracked it in a spreadsheet, a new, bitter ledger next to my household budget. Line item, theft by Leela, $287.34. My own forensic dive became obsessive. I scoured years of digital history, a masochistic excavation of our friendship. I found the patterns Amanda said I would, the constant small crises that preceded requests for money, a car repair, a medical bill, a forgotten tax payment, always timed just after I'd gotten a bonus or a tax refund. I found old text threads where she'd praised my pragmatism and rock-solidness in ways that now felt like grooming, conditioning me to see myself as her stabilizer, her human bank. Then I found the gallery. A local online arts magazine had a brief mention. Emerging artist Leela Shah secures vibrant new studio space in the River Arts District. The article was dated 2 weeks before she'd come to me with her tearful story about the deposit. She'd already had the studio. The opportunity wasn't impending, it was secured. The loan wasn't for a deposit, it was for something else. I sent the link to Amanda. "It's a start," she replied. "It establishes a pattern of deceit regarding the loan's purpose." The subpoenaed records arrived in thick, daunting envelopes. In Amanda's office, we spread them out like maps to a treacherous land. The Granite Peak file was the most revealing. The application had indeed been submitted from an IP address registered to a coffee shop near my apartment, one Leela frequented. But the kicker was the communication log. After the initial application, there was a recorded customer service call. Amanda played the audio file on her laptop. Leela's voice, bright and confident, filled the sterile office. "Hi, yes, I'm calling about application number LP4882. It's under Evelyn Chase. Yes, that's me. I just wanted to verify the wire instructions for the disbursement. Yes, to my account ending in 8891. Perfect. And you can expedite it? Wonderful." She had impersonated me, not just used my data, but spoken as me. Hearing her effortless, fraudulent use of my name was a violation deeper than the financial one. It was identity theft in its purest, most intimate form. The bank records were the final bleak confirmation. The $15,000 wire from Granite Peak hit her account on a Tuesday. By Friday, it was nearly gone. Not for rent, not for studio deposits. There was a $2,000 transfer to a high-end art supply website, a $1,500 payment to a luxury consignment boutique, a $4,000 check written to cash, dozens of smaller charges, nice restaurants, boutique hotels for a weekend trip I knew nothing about, spa services. It was a spree, a $15,000 celebration funded by my name, my credit, my trust. I stared at the line items, each one a tiny hammer blow. The private, desperate need she'd sold me was a fiction. This was greed, or entitlement, or a profound pathological disconnect between desire and consequence. She hadn't needed to save her life. She had wanted to finance an upgrade to her lifestyle. Amanda was unmoved by the social theater. "It's a common tactic," she said, her voice crisp over the speakerphone. "Discredit the accuser. It puts pressure on you to drop the charges to salvage your relationships. We proceed. We filed the civil suit. Now we enter discovery." The word discovery sounded like an archaeological dig. It felt like one. With the lawsuit officially filed, we had the power to subpoena records. Amanda's requests were surgical and damning. We subpoenaed Leela's bank records for the period surrounding the loan disbursement. We subpoenaed the complete file from Granite Peak Lending, including the IP address used for the application and all communication logs. While we waited, the loan itself was a ticking stone in my gut. I made the minimum payment, under duress, as Amanda advised. "Paying it doesn't admit liability, but defaulting destroys your credit while we fight," she explained. Each auto payment was a physical ache, a monthly tribute to betrayal. I tracked it in a spreadsheet, a new, bitter ledger next to my household budget. Line item, theft by Leela, $287.34. My own forensic dive became obsessive. I scoured years of digital history, a masochistic excavation of our friendship. I found the patterns Amanda said I would, the constant small crises that preceded requests for money, a car repair, a medical bill, a forgotten tax payment, always timed just after I'd gotten a bonus or a tax refund. I found old text threads where she'd praised my pragmatism and rock-solidness in ways that now felt like grooming, conditioning me to see myself as her stabilizer, her human bank. Then I found the gallery. A local online arts magazine had a brief mention. Emerging artist Leela Shah secures vibrant new studio space in the River Arts District. The article was dated 2 weeks before she'd come to me with her tearful story about the deposit. She'd already had the studio. The opportunity wasn't impending, it was secured. The loan wasn't for a deposit, it was for something else. I sent the link to Amanda. "It's a start," she replied. "It establishes a pattern of deceit regarding the loan's purpose." The subpoenaed records arrived in thick, daunting envelopes. In Amanda's office, we spread them out like maps to a treacherous land. The Granite Peak file was the most revealing. The application had indeed been submitted from an IP address registered to a coffee shop near my apartment, one Leela frequented. But the kicker was the communication log. After the initial application, there was a recorded customer service call. Amanda played the audio file on her laptop. Leela's voice, bright and confident, filled the sterile office. "Hi, yes, I'm calling about application number LP4882. It's under Evelyn Chase. Yes, that's me. I just wanted to verify the wire instructions for the disbursement. Yes, to my account ending in 8891. Perfect. And you can expedite it? Wonderful. She had impersonated me, not just used my data, but spoken as me. Hearing her effortless, fraudulent use of my name was a violation deeper than the financial one. It was identity theft in its purest, most intimate form. The bank records were the final bleak confirmation. The $15,000 wire from Granite Peak hit her account on a Tuesday. By Friday, it was nearly gone. Not for rent, not for studio deposits. There was a $2,000 transfer to a high-end art supply website, a $1,500 payment to a luxury consignment boutique, a $4,000 check written to cash, dozens of smaller charges, nice restaurants, boutique hotels for a weekend trip I knew nothing about, spa services. It was a spree. The money arrived. It landed in my checking account via wire transfer from James and Carol Shaw's joint savings, a sum that represented years of their deferred vacations, their careful planning, their modest security. The notification on my phone didn't bring relief, it brought a nauseating wave of guilt and unresolved anger. This wasn't justice, this was a bloodless financial transfusion, with Lila's parents as the unwilling donors. Amanda handled the formalities with granite efficiency. The loan was paid in full, my legal fees covered. Granite Peak Lending issued a formal letter confirming the debt was satisfied and would be reported as closed to the credit bureaus. On paper, I was made whole. The spreadsheet column next to Theft by Lila could finally read $0.00. But the other ledger, the one measuring trust and history and self-respect, was permanently in the red. The settlement agreement Amanda forced their lawyer to sign was airtight. In exchange for the repayment and a non-disclosure clause, we agreed not to pursue further civil action and to request the district attorney not file criminal charges. The NDA was my idea. I didn't want her story, her victim of a predatory lender, misunderstood artist narrative, to become the official history. Silence was the only trophy I could claim. The agreement contained no admission of guilt from Lila, only a sterile acknowledgement that the disputed financial matter has been resolved to the mutual satisfaction of both parties. It was a masterpiece of legal nothingness. I signed it. The pen felt heavy as an anchor. The social fallout, however, had its own inertia. The payment didn't trigger a wave of apologies or understanding. The narrative Lila had seeded was too entrenched, too dramatically satisfying. I was still the friend who'd lawyered up over a misunderstanding, who'd driven a fragile artist to the brink and forced her elderly parents to bail her out. The fact that the Shaws had paid was quietly spun as proof of their boundless compassion for their troubled daughter and their desire to placate my unreasonable vengeance. I tried once, with Maya. I showed her the settlement agreement, redacting the NDA, and a single line from the bank records showing the $15,000 wire to Lila's account. She stole my identity, Maya. She went on a shopping spree. Her parents paid because she couldn't. Maya looked at the documents, then at me, her expression pained. Eve, I believe you think that's what happened, but she's in a really dark place. She's seeing a therapist now. She says the loan company totally manipulated her, and then you just turned on her. I have to be there for her. This has been so traumatic for her. The cognitive dissonance was absolute. My evidence was a reflection of my perspective. Lila's trauma, self-reported and performative, was the accepted reality. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting Lila, I was fighting the archetype she so perfectly embodied, the beautiful, chaotic, suffering creative. I was the counter-archetype, the orderly, cold numbers person. In that story, who does the audience believe? I stopped trying. I let the friendships go. It was a mass extinction event in my personal ecosystem. The silence that followed was profound, and in its own way, clean. I focused on work, on the serene, predictable logic of debits and credits, where actions had clear consequences and numbers couldn't lie. Then, 6 months after the wire transfer, Carol Shaw called again. Her voice was smaller, stripped of even the tremulous hope from before. Eve, I'm sorry to bother you. It's Jim. He had a heart attack. He's stable, but the stress, the doctor said. The stress of everything. She didn't elaborate on everything. She didn't need to. I offered awkward condolences, sent flowers to the hospital, and felt like a monster. My restitution had come with a hidden surcharge, a man's health. I knew rationally that Lila's actions had caused the stress, not mine, but the chain of causation was a cold comfort. I was a link in that chain. A week later, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, nestled in crumpled tissue paper, was a small ceramic bowl. It was glazed in a stunning deep cobalt blue, flawed with intentional beautiful cracks filled with gold lacquer, the Japanese art of kintsugi. It was Lila's work. I'd recognize her style anywhere. There was no note. I held the bowl. It was exquisitely made. The message was infuriatingly eloquent. Kintsugi, the art of repairing broken things with gold, making them more beautiful for having been broken. She was casting herself as the broken artifact, and this was her offering, a symbol of transformation, of beauty born from damage. It was an attempt to reframe the entire catastrophe as a collaborative breaking, a necessary shattering that could lead to a more beautiful, gilded relationship. It was the ultimate act of artistic rebranding, turning her crime and its fallout into a metaphor for resilience. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to hurl it against the wall and watch the gold-veined shatters explode. Instead, I placed it on my kitchen counter. It sat there, a gorgeous, poisonous artifact, a symbol not of healing, but of her staggering, narcissistic resilience. While I was navigating police reports and legal threats and social exile, she had been in her studio, creating, turning our ruin into aesthetics. The bowl wasn't an apology, it was a performance piece, and I was the unwilling audience. It forced me to see the true, enduring consequence. This would never be over. Not really. The financial debt was cleared, but the emotional and psychological ledger was open-ended. Lila would continue to be Lila. She would spin this experience into her artist's statement, into tales of overcoming persecution, into the very texture of her authentic self. She would move through the world unburdened by the truth, her narrative polished and gilded, while I carried the weight of the actual history, alone. The bowl forced a final grim clarity. I had wanted closure, a clear line drawn under the event, but people like Lila don't provide closure. They provide sequels. They absorb conflict into their personal mythology and emerge with a new chapter. My victory, the returned money, the legal silence, was a tactical win in a war she had already reframed as her transformative journey. I picked up the bowl again. Its weight was solid, its surface cool. It was, undeniably, beautiful, and its beauty was a lie. Just as her tears had been, just as our friendship had ultimately been. I opened the kitchen cupboard, the one above the fridge where I keep spare light bulbs and the turkey platter I use once a year. I placed the bowl inside, in the back, in the dark. I did not hide it in shame. I archived it as evidence, a testament not to healing, but to the stunning, durable nature of the fraud. The consequence of my blind judgment was now a permanent fixture in my life. Not a debt, not a lawsuit, but a simple, awful understanding. I had given my trust to a master illusionist. The magic trick was over, the saw was gone through the box, and I was the one left feeling severed. But the illusionist was already taking her bow, the scattered pieces of my trust just another prop at her feet, while the audience, our old friends, the world, applauded the spectacle. My restitution was complete. My sentence, the lonely knowledge of what she was and what I had failed to see, was life. The bowl stayed in the dark. I did not take it out. It became a mental landmark, a fixed point in the emotional geography I was slowly, painstakingly remapping. The first year was one of subtraction. I subtracted Leela's birthday from my calendar, our mutual friends from my social media, the shared restaurants from my rotation. I subtracted the habit of reaching for my phone when something funny happened. The world became quieter, simpler, and starkly genuine. My parents, who had watched the ordeal with baffled horror, tiptoed around me. "Are you seeing anyone?" my mother finally asked over a careful lunch, her meaning encompassing both therapists and potential new friends. I told her I was fine. It wasn't entirely a lie. There was a strange peace in the austerity. My accounting job, once just a paycheck, became a sanctuary of objective truth. 2 plus 2 was always 4. Assets always balanced liabilities. It was a clean, honest world. I began running. Not from anything, but toward exhaustion. The rhythm of feet on pavement, the burning clarity of oxygen debt had its own cold equation. Push this hard, feel this pain, achieve this distance. It was manageable. It was mine. The second year was about equilibrium. The sharp grief had calcified into a permanent low-grade awareness, like the phantom ache of a healed bone before a storm. I made new friends, slowly, cautiously, not with the volcanic intensity of childhood, but with the measured pace of adults who have been burned. Sarah, from my running group, who talked only of pace and nutrition. Ben, a quiet colleague who loved board games with elaborate, unambiguous rules. Our conversations were bounded, safe. I cherished the limits. I heard about Leela in oblique, glancing ways. A friend of a friend mentioned seeing her work at a trendy gallery opening. She'd titled her new series Kintsugi. The critic, I was told, praised its brave exploration of personal fragmentation and the alchemy of repair. I felt nothing but a distant, icy contempt. She had commodified even that. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 3 years after the wire transfer, I saw her. I was leaving a client's office in a part of the city we'd both once frequented. She was halfway down the block, struggling to fold a giant, collapsed artist's portfolio against the wind. She was thinner, her hair was shorter, dyed a dramatic silver that should have looked harsh, but on her looked intentional and striking. She wore paint-spattered jeans and a black leather jacket, the uniform of artistic effort. She looked exactly like what she was, a successful, slightly struggling, aesthetically coherent artist. Our eyes met. There was no time to cross the street, no way to avoid it. The rain fell in a dull, steady curtain between us. I kept walking, my pace steady, my expression neutral. The old scripts flashed through my mind, the tearful reunion, the screamed accusations, the icy silence. They were all performances, and I was done performing. As we drew parallel, she stopped struggling with the portfolio. She looked at me, and I saw a frantic, familiar calculation flash behind her eyes. Which version of Leela did this moment require? The repentant friend? The wounded victim? The evolved artist? I gave her nothing to work with. No anger, no hurt, no curiosity. Just the flat, polite acknowledgement you'd give a vaguely familiar stranger. "Eve," she said. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "Leela," I replied. A simple identification. A fact. "You look... well," she tried. It was a probe. "Thank you." I didn't return the compliment. I just stood there, waiting. The rain pattered on my umbrella. The silence stretched. Her eyes searched my face, looking for an entry point, a crack in the marble. She found none. The helpless victim act died unborn. The defiant artist had no audience. I was just a woman with an umbrella, taking up space on the sidewalk. She shifted on her feet, the portfolio slipping. I heard about your father, Jim. I'm sorry." It was the wrong thing to say. It was a gambit to introduce shared history, a lever to pry open sentiment. But it reminded me only of the hospital, of Carol's shattered voice, of the second mortgage. "I appreciate that," I said, my tone still even, administrative. "How are your parents?" It was a precise surgical strike, a question about the people she'd used as human shield, a reminder of the real, ungilded cost. Her face tightened, the polished artist facade flickering. She couldn't spin an answer here. "They're managing," she said finally, looking away. Another silence. The rain filled it. "Well," I said, glancing at my watch, a meaningless gesture. "Take care, Leela." I began to walk away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel her standing there in the rain, her unperformed lines stuck in her throat, her brilliant, manipulative mind finally encountering a problem with no elegant solution. I was no longer a character in her story. I was a closed account. That night, for the first time, I took the bowl down from the cupboard. I set it on my kitchen table under the bright pendant light. I studied the gold veins, the beautiful repair of the breaks. I saw the care, the skill, the artistic intention. And I saw clearly that the breaks were not the result of a shared tragedy or a beautiful accident. They were the deliberate, violent shattering of one object to provide the raw material for another. The bowl wasn't a symbol of healing. It was a record of destruction. I didn't smash it. I didn't put it back in the dark. I kept it on the table. It was no longer a haunting. It was a paperweight, a solid, cold object that pinned down the truth of the past, allowing me to move freely in the present. The final consequence of my blind judgment was not eternal damage. It was knowledge. I had learned the arithmetic of people. Some are addition, some are subtraction, and some are a complex, toxic formula that looks like addition until you solve for X and find only 0 or less. I subtracted Leela. I was adding Sarah, Ben, the quiet satisfaction of a balanced ledger, the clean pain of a long run. My life was not a masterpiece. It was a work in progress, built on simpler, sturdier math. The cold equations of betrayal had been solved, not with a grand, dramatic answer, but with the steady, undramatic work of rebuilding on a new, more solid foundation. The marble girl of my friendship had shattered, revealing not a monster, but a beautiful, empty vessel, and I had finally learned to stop trying to drink from it. I filled the bowl with oranges, a bright, ordinary fruit, a thing of simple sustenance. It looked incongruous, the vibrant spheres against the deep blue and gold, but it was my choice. I could look at it now and see not her art, but my own repurposing, a container for something real. That was my victory. Not forgetting, but integrating the hollow beauty of the lie into the quiet, nourishing truth of my own life. The equation, finally, balanced.